curing cancer, bipolar disorder, and ear infections. All this and more right now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's remarkable episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Katrina Foe story. This week, we cover some topics that are controversial. We talk about modern day medicine versus holistic medicine and finding the balance in between them. We talk about Katrina and her life story and how she was able to overcome and beat cancer, bipolar, and other ailments, from ear infections to things that we take for granted every day, to diabetes and Alzheimer's, with her patients protecting us from those in the future. So this is a great episode on truly healthcare and well-being for ourselves and our family. So please listen, do, repeat what you're hearing so you can have a great life, and share it with your family and friends. I don't want to talk a lot more. Let's get into this episode and listen to the whole thing. She is a teacher, a coach, an author. She is an entrepreneur, but more than anything, she's a friend and human who wants to help other friends and humans. So listen to what she has to say. Check out Katrina's website, and I hope we hear back how much better you're doing in life and how you're helping others. Also, a special shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to us by MyPillow. Go to mypillow.com, buy anything you want and need. Use promo code REMARKABLE and get up to 80% off everything. I use the sheets, the mattress topper, the towels. I use the blankets. I use the even couch cushions. You can probably see in the background if you're watching this. And I'm not saying it because they're a sponsor. I'm saying it because I mean it. I love their products. I've never slept better in my life. And not only are you getting the best price you'll probably find in the market today, but you're getting them all for up to 80% off with promo code REMARKABLE. So check out mypillow.com. Also, Jasper. I love their air filters. I never would have spent around $1,000 to buy an air filter until Jasper. Not only have I used it, I can feel a difference in the air. I sleep better. I started getting up and making my bed in the morning when it made me more aware. When I was like spraying cologne, I had no idea the toxicity. That thing would kick on. We're cooking in the kitchen using the plate, pots and pans. It would emit like toxic fumes. The Jasper would kick on and clean the air. And then it got me where we bought new pots and pans because of it, right? So I thoroughly believe in MyPillow, and I deeply believe in Jasper. Check them out. Use promo code REMARKABLE. You can get the links in the show notes, but Jasper spelled JASPR.com. Two products that they're worth every penny, and you will have a better life. So thank you for your patience in this intro. At this time, check out our friend, Katrina Foe. Hey, Katrina, how are you today?
Oh, it's great to talk with you today.
Oh, I am pumped to have you here. I just told our audience around the world a little bit about you and what to expect today. But if you were to personally summarize, when they listen to your episode, they're going to get a ton of information. They can, like our slogan says, listen, do, repeat for life, to have a better life in this eternity and the next. But if you're going to guarantee them one thing that they're going to walk away with in this episode, what is that?
They're going to learn that cancer is not just, a roulette chance game of, am I going to get it? That there are things that we can see in testing that are going to predispose them and drive those cancer, as well as looking afterwards to see what they need to clean up to make sure it doesn't come back.
Beautiful. So cancer's been in the news in years and years and years. There's billions of dollars that go into funding cancer research. And a lot of people say, even if there was a cure of cancer, you're never going to see it because there's trillions of dollars in the industry a year, right? So you had a journey. talk to us about your life from birth through today. What brought this to your attention ultimately? How did it become a passion? What happened to you? And why are you here today? So start off, where are you
Yeah.
from? What's your upbringing like?
So I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona originally. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho now, and was up here in Idaho. We had just moved when I found the cancer. I was nursing my fifth baby, and he was about a year old, and I had a mastitis, a little plug duct, and I didn't think much of it. I'm a nursing mom. There's a big lump, no big thing. But once I cleared up that mastitis, there was still a golf ball sized lump there, which was a little surprising. And again, at that point, I still wasn't that concerned. And my mom popped out with this, oh, well, your grandma had breast cancer and had a double mastectomy. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Why have I never heard this before? And I guess it was kind of vague because she didn't talk about it and didn't really even tell my mom for sure that's what happened, which is, I guess back then they didn't talk about it like they do now. And I think it's really important for people to understand what's going on. So I went and did some testing and came back with the diagnosis of breast cancer. And again, it was really shocking because we had already been on a health journey. We had already had some issues where we had chosen to address things naturally in our family and seen amazing results. So I already knew I didn't want what standard of care was offering, and I wanted to look at things a little differently. But I was kind of annoyed and frustrated because I felt like I was already doing the stuff. Like I was not eating standard American diet. Like we were making our own toiletries, making our own cleaning products, like from scratch food, like to the point where we had moved up to Idaho. And one of the reasons was because we wanted some land so that we could raise our own meat animals, so that we could have really clean meat. And I think for most people, that's a little crazy extreme. So, to find out that I have cancer, it was just like out of nowhere.
Yeah, and now back that up though, because for we can for years build and build and build and build the toxins in our body. And a lot of time cancers and tumors, like I myself had a tumor when I was 18, and then a lot of that can be emotional related. It weakens your body, your mind. It just has a control that we don't understand. It's not really talked about, but it's 100% true. So what happened in your background and past? Like you're living clean now, but how many years of quote unquote normal or unhealthy living did you endure?
I'm so glad that you asked that. That is actually one of the 10 root cause drivers that we look at with cancer. And it's the one that no one's talking about, no one's like acknowledging or doing anything about. And it's huge, if not the biggest, most important one. So, what I see clinically is that clients, when they have a cancer diagnosis about the year prior, there's something super traumatic emotionally, some loss of a job, loss of a loved one, some kind of crisis, some ongoing abuse that crescendos, something going on that is there. And oftentimes they know exactly what it is when I bring it up. And then oftentimes we have to dig in a little bit more. And usually those are the people that, well, a lot of people tend to do the ostrich move and put their head in the sand and try to avoid it. So for me, I had just moved to a new state where I knew no one, out in the middle of nowhere. I'm an extrovert. I had no support network, and I was in an emotionally traumatic relationship. So there was a lot going on there, and there was definitely a crescendo with all these factors emotionally right before the birth and everything. So, that was about a year before.
Okay. So now you're now growing up too. Let's go back because normally the format of the show is we go through your whole story and not to some people whip through their childhood, some people spend an hour in their childhood, but everything that happens to us, good, bad, ugly, pretty, pretty ugly, it makes us the humans we are today. So in your childhood, did you eat pretty clean, average, quote unquote, American? Did you eat healthy? Did you eat terrible? Did you have a stressful upbringing? Was there abuse in it? Like anything else that would contribute to the future? Because sometimes it's like we have something under the surface. It's like a ticking time bomb. And then so now you move to Idaho and all these other instances, all these other things are happening. So it weakens you that cancer breaks through. You know what I mean? So is there
Totally.
anything else that led up to this? Because we have listeners all over the world and that's how they connect with you because they see, oh, I have the similar story.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, We ate a very healthy diet according to the government guidelines.
Oh
My
yeah,
mom
the
was
one that
very
says
diligent.
cereal is healthier than steak, right?
Yeah. So my mom was always on a diet and it was very much focused on low fat. So we were eating lots of margarine, lots of, fake this, fake that, trying to get the calories down for her. But what I see looking back is there was a lot of the inflammatory vegetable oils. There was such a lack of anything nutritious in terms of these good, healthy, satiating fats, which I found now to be so important for me personally. The saving grace was that I loved tuna fish. And I would eat tuna fish straight out of a can. I was super picky eater, but that was my one thing. And I think that really helped me in terms of getting some fat and like nutrition in there, albeit possibly with some mercury sprinkled on top. Um, for me, I was diagnosed with a prolapsed mitral valve when I was 10. And interestingly enough, they don't do this anymore, but they require that if you have that, you have to have a whole round of antibiotics every time you get a dental cleaning, which means that I had just from the dental visits like 20 rounds of antibiotics before I was even 21. And there were quite a few other rounds. So like my microbiome was not so good. And that much antibiotics, especially prophylactically, where you don't really need it per se, can make a huge, huge difference on what your gut is doing and the gut flora going on in there. And I'm really glad that they have discontinued that, but it had a profound effect on me. And then I think another factor growing up, my parents had a very toxic marriage that was hard to be around. So my sister and I grew up with that, and we were never really connected because she was always at a different school than I was, just timing wise. So, there wasn't that support system there that I think most people have going into this.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So two things. You almost never hear in, especially in mainstream, that how important your mouth is to your heart. And the correlation between dental work and heart arrhythmias and stuff, it's just off the chart. And then when you add in antibiotics to treat it, that's just like the trifecta of opportunity for cancer and other bad things to happen to you. So when you would get on these antibiotics, you're young, you don't know better. The doctor's telling you to do it. But as you get older, your body starts to kind of, I guess, and tell me if I'm wrong, but for me, like I would react more where the stomach afterwards, the after effects of antibiotics would last longer and it would take me longer to heal and longer to recover. So again, my immune system's weakened, it's fighting, so it gives that cancer and other bad things time to grow. Is that how you were feeling while this was happening too?
Yeah, that can definitely be a thing for most people. And that's, I think, what we would typically think of. For me, I didn't have any symptoms. My
Oh, okay.
gut was fine, which was, again, one of these things that I like to mention to people because when they don't have symptoms like I was, they don't see things coming. They're not motivated to do something. There's no way I would have ever looked into my gut because I didn't have any symptoms. My gut felt fine. Maybe I'd get a little bloated here and there. They wasn't correlated with a specific food. It didn't seem like a big thing. But looking back at the history, knowing what I know now, like again, it was probably over about 30 rounds of antibiotics before I was 20 with the other issues that had gone on, ear infections and stuff. Like that's a big deal. That will have an effect whether you can feel it or not. And like you were saying, predispose and mess with my immune system. So it's a big deal whether you feel it or not. And this is what gets me so excited because for me, there were so many things that I couldn't feel, there weren't symptoms for that were definitely brewing and there that, we can see with testing very clearly now.
Yeah. All right. So again, I don't mean to sidetrack, but I want to kind of fill some gaps in because our listeners, some people grew up in India or Ireland, the medicine's different, the treatment's different. In America, if you went to the doctor for anything, even a stitch, they're like, here, take antibiotics just in case. Hey, you got a sneeze, take antibiotics. Oh, it's antibiotics for everything during the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s. All right. So
Yeah, and
Katrina, so now
that's what
you,
I grew up with was antibiotics for everything. Like So many ear infections. I had tubes twice. And again, tons of antibiotics with all that. Where now, as a mom, I know that I can handle ear infections super simple at home and make pain stop like that without any kind of medical intervention or drugs or anything. And this kind of information is really getting lost in terms of how to handle our kids naturally and support their microbiomes in any part of their body, not just, going to the doctor and throwing antibiotics at it. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that now or later. The ear infections. Every parent in the world who's had a child has had ear infections, some more severe than others. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. You probably have 10 times better solutions, but just pouring a little bit of peroxide in the child's ear, even my ear. If I feel a cold coming on, put a little peroxide, let it work until it bubbles away. Man, I feel great. What do you recommend for ear infections?
Yeah, that's a great technique. So usually I will do, if the child tells me enough ahead of time before it's like a huge thing, like they're crying in the middle of the night thing, I will do some garlic ear oil with a little mullein in it. And you can make that at home. Just saute chopped up garlic fresh in some olive oil, keep it low heat. And this is great because I always have those two on hand, and I'll throw some mullein in if I have it. If it's like a acute issue, that's when I pull out the big guns. And again, these are things that I always have on hand. So I'll chop up an onion and saute it in apple cider vinegar and then strain it off and put that poultice in like a little sack and put a cup. So the steam from the onion and the apple cider vinegar gets into the ear canal and the warmth helps open it up. And I tell you, it is amazing. I have had people writhing on the floor that within like 5 minutes, they're fine. And for a mom, like in the middle of the night, like that is gold. And I just hope it gets out there more because it's super simple and you usually have apple cider vinegar and onions around.
Yeah, and do you have that recipe on your website or instructions how to do that?
I don't. I
Okay.
don't. I could give it to you, but it's super simple. There's not like measurements and everything. That's how I cook, so it's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is I'll put in the show notes a link whether to your site or to a YouTube video on how to do it.
I
And
can
then
do
that
that.
way people, because there's people like me, there's a point in my life where I never heard of such a thing. You think I'm putting food near my kid's ear, and it's like, would you rather put chemicals from an unknown factory in China in your kid's ear? They're boiling freaking chemicals and toxic waste that you wouldn't touch if you saw, and you're going to shove that in your kid's ear. So put in some
Exactly.
natural garlic and onion. That's some great stuff.
Yeah, I can definitely send you like a YouTube video on that.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes just to accompany the episode. So, all right. So now you moved to Idaho. You said
Yes.
at that time you had 5 children,
Yes. Well,
and
the
then
fifth one was born in Idaho, and he was probably about a year old when we found the cancer.
okay, and then back up. Did you say when you got to Idaho, was it just the isolation and not having friends that was stressful, or did you have other trauma going on in your life?
So when I moved to Idaho, it was very stressful for me as an extrovert to not have any friends or support network. We knew nobody there. We were out in the middle of nowhere, meaning I literally couldn't see a neighbor, and the nearest Costco was about 2 hours away. But, I think all of that probably would have been tolerable, except that, I was in a toxic relationship, very emotionally stressful, which crescendoed right before the pregnancy, right before the delivery, rather. So there was all of that brewing and very hard time emotionally for me.
Yeah, and that consistently plays into health, especially breast cancer. I mean, I've had so many women that I know that they were in bad relationships and they end up getting out of it and then they get breast cancer. There is a correlation. I don't understand. I can't explain it, but I know it's there. And then looking back again, we go through your story. You said that your mother and father had a toxic relationship, and then you ended up in a toxic relationship. So while the pattern was there, learned behavior, comfort in the dysfunction, whatever it was, what did you learn that you can share with our listeners to help them get out of a toxic relationship or to identify it, not to get into it?
Oh, that's a big question. So
Welcome to
for
the.
for me, what I realized through this whole process, examining what had happened growing up, as well as, what happened to me. Like, I very much believe that, we manifest our emotions physically. Like there's some interesting stuff talking about how we store it in our fascia, so that's kind of hard stuff for us to really understand. And it's not really in our Western paradigm, but I see this every day with clients and with myself. So for me, I had this trauma in childhood watching this, and that was a pattern, a model set up for me. And that was exactly like what my dad did to my mom was exactly the same as my ex-husband like doing to me. And it's really hard to understand, like when you're looking for that ideal spouse, like if you haven't done the emotional work and knowing what you're carrying and what you're attracting and bringing in, it can be really daunting to make sure that, you get somebody, because you're going to draw in the same thing over and over again to get that almost like a chance to change the narrative, do something different.
Yeah, and people who are abused or people who are around that type of abuse, it's what they know, and consciously or subconsciously they're attracted to it. So now that you've seen it in your upbringing, you sadly saw it in your personal relationship as an adult. What are the things you're doing now and that you'd advise our listeners to do to safeguard from falling into the same trap again?
I think the biggest thing is to do your own emotional work. Everybody, no matter what your life circumstances, has emotional trauma to some degree. Just, not necessarily big T trauma, but little things that happen that have gone on in the past, happening in the future, but things that are, just recurring things, like people that get anxious or stressed about certain situations, like deal with that, because a lot of times there's underlying things there. So I've done a ton of work. I was divinely put in connection with an amazing couple that does very graceful, gentle way of clearing this. And I have embraced it. And it was exactly what I was looking for, both for myself and for my clients, because, when you have cancer, to really do this emotional work on a deep level can be very difficult, because you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis. Oftentimes people feel terrible. There's a ticking clock, so a lot of times going to, traditional counseling, while that can be very helpful for some, they may not have the emotional capacity to then bring all this stuff to the surface and have to make things worse before it gets better and string it out over years to get into all this. They need something very quick, gentle, peaceful, that lets these emotional scars melt away without a lot of extra work.
Yes. And what were some of the practical things, like everyday things that work for you? Maybe like one or two examples that really helped you through it and get adjusted before we move back to the actual cancer.
In terms of emotional clearing, kind of.
Yeah, because everybody's different, and males, females, there's similarities, there's differences, but going through that toxic relationship and you're going through cancer, somebody else is listening right now going through the same thing. So as you personally overcame it, what were some of the practical things, even sayings or habits? What did you build into your life that helped change things and move you in the right direction?
Yeah, so from a practical everyday viewpoint, it was really key for me to be grounded in my faith, like having prayer time. I don't tend to get super legalistic about it has to be at this time of day and I do this kind of thing. It's more about being in constant communion with the Lord and knowing that He's got me, that there's, a bigger purpose for what I'm going through. But, additionally, again, I mentioned doing the energetic work, whether, people want to go see a counselor or they're doing some kind of energetic clearing, doing something and following that program. That to me was so life-giving and so life-changing, of actually releasing some of those scars. And so the combination of the two was really been super therapeutic for me.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's hard and I know it's like, personal, but that's what this show is all about, is like not just what you were able to overachieve or what you were able to achieve or overcome, but how you did it so the listeners can too. And then at the end, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we're going to share Katrina's information so you can connect with her, continue the conversation, see the resource she has on her website, and, maybe even become a client so you guys can work together. But let's do this, Katrina. Now, you're going through personal trauma, pain, struggle, freaking nightmare stuff. People who haven't gone through it, hopefully they don't ever figure it out. But when you're going through a divorce, it's horrible and it's stressful. And now on top of this, you've had cancer manifest in your body. So you feed it peace and you get better. You feed it stress and you get worse. So where did your life go from that point?
Well, I'm not proud to say that I did not deal with my stuff at the time. I did the ostrich move, which is, I think, why as a practitioner, I'm, extremely sensitive to like how important it is. I got through, and I remember telling my practitioner, like, I need to deal with these emotions, these issues. And she didn't really take that seriously. She didn't hold me accountable. We didn't talk about it. I didn't have any tools. I was kind of left on my own in that. And I just dropped it. And I had to circle back around years later after I was in remission to pick that back up. And knowing what I know now as a practitioner and seeing how impactful it is for clients, I'm like, okay, I need to deal with this. And it was becoming more of an issue again, to where I was like, is this going to bring it back?
Yeah. So then talk about your actual journey. I mean, you got 4 kids, now 5 kids. What was the journey like? How did you get through it?
So at first, I was, again, very frustrated. I decided I clearly something I was doing was not right. And I didn't want to have my personal bias affect my, life or death situation. So I put everything on the table that I thought I knew and started from scratch of what do I know about health and nutrition and these, other factors. What am I missing? And the biggest aspect was the diet. Like, do I do raw vegan? Do I do more of, Westin-Price, or do I do something, more extreme, like a ketogenic diet? Like, where do I fall? And I first off went down to Mexico to a Gerson clinic where they do, all vegan, lots of juices per day, set of supplements for everybody. And I had read everything, but all the stuff back then was saying raw vegan. And so I'm like, okay, this is not where I tend to go, but let's explore it. And I had a lot of questions. So I was asking the staff different things and they didn't really have any answers. And then by the third day, the director pulled me aside and said he wanted to talk to me. And he was kind of like just super condescending and, saying, oh, well, my staff has been telling me that you've been asking a lot of questions. No, I think you just need to trust in the process. I was so shocked because to me, like, part of health is, getting to understand what's going on, and they didn't have any answers. And I got a little upset. I'm like, I can't trust you if I don't know what the answers are. Like, why would I just put my blind faith in you? I don't know you. And you're not showing me any reasons why this would work. So he told me to leave. So, I mean, at that point, I'm feeling like I'm free falling because I didn't know, like, that was where I had decided to go that direction. And I didn't expect for them to kick me out of a cancer clinic. But a friend of mine connected me with a functional practitioner who does what I do now. And she started running tests. And I had never run any tests. I mean, I didn't even know what these tests were. And the whole thing was super interesting to me because there was a lot of stuff. Like I said, I didn't have really many symptoms. I was maybe tired. I had some extra weight that I couldn't seem to shake. Like, there wasn't these big, like, I'm just in pain and agony kind of things.
And also with everything you're going through, you just had a baby, you're going through divorce, tired and extra weight. That's just part of that too. So you can't even tell which is causing which, right?
Well, and I wasn't going through a divorce at that point. But
Oh,
yeah, I
okay.
mean, that's just like postpartum, right? I mean, tired and extra weight.
Yeah.
So at that point, there was a lot of stuff coming to my attention of like, there's a lot of stuff wrong. that I need to start addressing. And so we started on a journey with that. And this is where it got kind of crazy. So a friend of mine, I felt like I had it. I had all the supplements, I had the diet, I had these things, and I'm like, I got this. Like, I'm feeling real confident. And a friend of mine invited me to a retreat. And I remember being super judging, like, oh, they're going to eat crappy food. I don't really want to go there. And I just kept feeling like I should go. So I did. And every time that they had like a breakout prayer time, it was just super heavy on my heart that I needed to go home and be with my husband in the biblical sense. And I thought that was a little weird because who does God tell to like when to have sex? And I had this whole like argument going on. I'm like, okay, we just had a fight. Could we wait a week? And, oh, and I have cancer. Like, I know what time of month it is because we had just redone my hormones. And like, I don't, people are already pissed at me that I'm doing it naturally. I really don't think that this is going to fly if I get pregnant, I mean, it was this huge struggle internally. And eventually, I by the end of the retreat, I did go home and have sex with my husband, and I got pregnant, which puts a whole new spin on the thing because then it's like, I'm like a target. People are pissed at this point. And so we went.
And when you say people, two things. When you say people, you mean like family and friends, I'm taking it?
Yes.
Okay.
I had been very, very public about what was going on. I had asked for prayers, and I had asked for protection from the negativity. So if they thought I should do standard care, hey, please don't mention it to me. I don't want to hear it because I didn't want all that emotional tug of war going on with what do I feel confident doing.
And then
So
you said your husband. So were you married the whole time? Did you get divorced? Like explain that process.
yes, I was married during the whole cancer process.
Okay. So even though things were rough, you moved to Idaho, even during the cancer, you were still married.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I thought you said you got divorced
No,
then and then went to
no.
Mexico. So you were married this whole time. It was just a toxic relationship.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry for the confusion there.
No, it's
So
okay.
So I'm pregnant, and we decided to get away, which we never did. And we went to the Westin-Price conference just to kind of ground ourselves, have a little alone time. And I was waiting for him after a session. I was talking to this guy who had these magnetic bed pads. And I'm asking him questions, just kind of killing time. I'm like, so how does this work for pregnancy? Right? I'm like 6 weeks pregnant. So it's not like you could tell. And he starts telling me how it's super non-toxic, very gentle detox. And then I asked him how it seemed like this might be something good for cancer. Would this help cancer? And he looked at me and he said, well, pregnancy cures cancer. And I was just like even now I get an emotional response because I had not connected those. I had not said I had cancer. I had not said I was pregnant. And I found out later after talking with him that he was a cancer specialist that was not allowed to say that because of different NAFTA stuff. And it was very interesting. This was his at-home model. So this was just really, I've heard since then from several alternative cancer specialists that this can be an issue. This can be a thing. I mean, this is not where you tell someone to go get pregnant if they have cancer, but it can have that effect in some people, which I had never heard. I had heard people having abortions when they find out they have cancer. So this was like really mind blowing to me. But I get very sick when I'm pregnant. The hyperemesis gravidarum, where you can't keep food down and everything. So like all my supplements and food, best intentions kind of went out the window. And there was very little for my cancer that I could still take that was safe during pregnancy. But there was some interesting dynamics going on with the pregnancy. I got a very ridiculously severe anemia. And by about a month before I delivered, the whole golf ball was gone.
Wow. So your body like dissolved it. So even though you were getting anemic, thinning it out, it was using that anemia to thin out the cancer. Is that what happened?
there was something going on, and I wish I could say that I knew exactly what it was. I wish now, looking back, that I had done more testing during that time, just for my own curiosity to see what was going on. But I had a friend that was telling me how she felt her tumor going down every day, and I was getting a little like up in the head about it. So I stopped touching it and checking on it for probably about 6 months, just to not drive myself crazy. So again, I wish I had looked into this a little bit more and had done some more blood work and different things, but I didn't. So yeah, something was magical, joking, happening physiologically in my body, that my body was able to break down the entire tumor and get rid of it.
Yeah, and that's so intriguing because there's always a reason. Like God creates science. So if somebody says they don't believe in God, well, he still creates science. 2 + 2 is 4, and the world still spins. But when it comes to what you're saying, whether, whatever the process was, even just the growth of a human and the stem cells and the new life, all that, you guys feed off one another. So it might have taken some of those baby growth stem cells, all the DNA and the healing in the world, and it just pounded away that cancer. So that's super
Yeah,
interesting. And I'm like you, I don't know how to explain it maybe scientifically, but it's real. It really happened. So
it
awesome. So,
is.
so where does your life go from there, Katrina?
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. This is my
Like this
not
hasn't been interesting enough, right?
right. So I nursed him for a year, and then I went back to my practitioner and said, okay, I did not finish all the work for all the stuff that we had found, and I want to get back and finish that work to make sure that this does not come back. Because I really understood at that point that the soil that grew the cancer needed to change. And I hadn't done that because I had kind of taken a little shortcut detour by having a baby. So she told me to read Fat for Fuel by Joseph Mercola. And I was like, no, like ketogenic is scary. That's really dangerous. And she introduced me to Dr. Naisha Winter's book, Metabolic Approach to Cancer. And I did read Mercola's book. And by 2/3 of the way through, I was doing a ketogenic diet, because it really resonated, the science and the concepts behind these books. And what I found was really interesting. So I did mention, but growing up, I had been diagnosed bipolar. I had been on heavy medications, inpatient at one point for about a week. And in my 20s, I had weaned myself off because the meds felt terrible. They didn't help. They, changed them a million times, and it didn't actually take away any of the symptoms. So there had been about 20 years where I white knuckled it. And I was determined, like, I was not going to do anything to hurt myself because of my moral convictions. But it wasn't fun to live that way. And when I went on the ketogenic diet, I noticed that I was feeling better. But I didn't really say anything because I didn't know if it was like a temporary thing. But then my daughter pointed out, we were doing like a family devotion about being joyful in all things, and how different situations we can find God's working in it. And she goes, well, like mom's cancer. And I'm like, what? And she goes, well, if mom hadn't had cancer, she wouldn't have tried keto, and now she's happy. So before I was ready to say it and claim it, like, she saw it. And what I found is, since then, I've had another baby, and I was not able to stay in ketosis during that. And I could feel like all the symptoms came back, and I can play with it now of like, if I'm in a ketogenic state, I can put my bipolar completely in remission. And at this point, I've got some other tools so I don't have to stay as strict keto, but this is not out there either. Like the mental health connection with diet. Granted, a ketogenic diet's pretty extreme, and most people don't want to deal with that. But if you're talking about, not feeling suicidal or not dying of cancer, like, hello, it's totally worth it. So this is kind of where my journey went.
Yeah, and and there's so much to life. And I hate to say this, but our medical system gets paid to keep people sick. Now, I had a friend who for 3 years he had the same issue, kept flying to America to get the quote unquote best medical care in the world. 3 years, he was still sick. He went to Thailand one day, $500. They told him what was wrong, gave him like a simple plan to fix what was going on with him. And 3 days later, he didn't have a problem that he's had for years. And it's because they care about healing people, not keeping them in the system. So what you're saying makes total sense to me. And hopefully it's resonating with our listeners. And I really do, how many people now are struggling with mental illness and bipolar and depression and all of these things since the government locked us down globally, right? So what were some of the things besides just the ketogenic diet? Are there any other tips or tricks you have for people struggling with bipolar that help you stay stable and without having kind of a setback?
Yeah, so many things there. So you had said earlier about them, not ever finding a cure for cancer, and I 100% agree. They're not going to find a cure ever because there is not one cure. So we know that cancer is multifactorial, and so it's very individual for each person what is causing the cancer, and it's not one thing. So if you're chasing after one thing to get one cure, it's not going to work because it's never one thing. It's usually out of the 10 areas that we look at, and these are all things that are well researched, there's usually like 7 or 8 things that are driving the cancer. So it's finding all of the things and making sure that you address all those. And again, the emotional, mental component is one of those areas. So with something like bipolar, even, anxiety, depression, these are so common nowadays. And to actually address those, yes, the ketogenic diet is going to be the base foundation to get those fats in that are, again, clean ketogenic. So not the vegetable oils and such, but, things like butter, tallow, coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, those kinds of healthy fats. Those are going to be super nourishing to the brain and very, very helpful. And then getting the carbs down is going to produce ketones, which are therapeutic not only for cancer, but also for a lot of these mental illnesses and such that we're dealing with. And what I have found is that when I'm dealing with cancer clients, like there's so many things going on, but if I don't first address the anxiety and depression, that does not seem like the main issue, obviously, I'm not going to get any of those other things to move. So if they're depressed and they can't get off the couch and they're not motivated to live, are they going to do all these crazy protocols to address all the other areas that created the cancer? No,
Yeah.
no, they're not going to touch it. And they're going to be so bound up in anxiety or whatever their issue is that we can't deal with things. So making sure that that's a priority. And so for me, ketogenic diet's a really, really helpful one, and that will do it. But also the mineral lithium orotate I have found to be super helpful. Now, I just want to clarify, not the prescription lithium carbonate. That can be very toxic in high amounts and needs to be watched and addressed with a practitioner. But lithium orotate is over the counter. This is a mineral that should be in our water supply and is not. And some people are more sensitive to needing more of it. And there's a lot of research. There's no negative side effects. It's a beautiful thing. And you need very, very little. It's pretty low dose compared to the carbonate. But looking at the neurotransmitters, so I'll look at an oat test and see what the neurotransmitters are doing and look at that alongside the symptoms to really address like, oh, we need some extra B vitamins. Let's make sure you're breaking down your protein to get the amino acids properly. All that stuff. We have tools to see what's needed and really address things thoroughly.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you talked about the lithium because, old school people were depressed. They'd put them on the chemical lithium and, here, this will make you happy, right?
Yeah, well, that's what's in, you've heard probably about cocaine being in Coca-Cola originally. Like
Yeah.
7-Up was actually lithium. And they would give people that to make them happy because they knew that mineral was really helpful that way.
Yes, and that's what I was going to get at. So everybody talks about Cuban cigars, Cuban cigars, Cuban cigars. And Cuban cigars, yeah, they're at the right, level of the planet where they have the right humidity and the right temperature and the tropical environment. But what most people don't know is Cuba has the highest lithium content in the soil than any country in the world. And when
Interesting.
you grow these tobacco leaves, that's why people love Cubans. They don't even know it, but that euphoric, that relaxing feeling, the higher the lithium content in the soil, the higher it goes into the plant, the better medicinal effects it has.
I
So
love
that's similar to what you're saying. I didn't even know you said it's lithium orotate.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's again, this is a supplement that you can get over the counter. It's not a prescription. Usually if people have, well, you don't need very much. It's low dose. And sometimes it takes a while if people are super deficient to kind of build up in their system. Sometimes people feel it instantaneously, like you were talking about with the cigars. It just depends on the other things going on with that client. I
Beautiful.
did not know that about the cigars. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I did I never smoked a cigar. I never smoked anything till I was in my 40s. And I got very, very, very just what's the word like? I got so not enthralled, but like so interested in it because when I'd smoke a cigar, I'd sleep like a baby.
Mhm.
And chemicals, cigarettes have 227 chemicals per stick, carcinogens, trash, toxic waste. It's poison. But a real cigar is just tobacco leaves. So the
Yeah.
only thing that could possibly be bad in it is nicotine. But even that, God gives us everything within moderation. So I just would research and research and research and talk to people. And I'm thinking to myself, who are the most well-adjusted, balanced humans I know? Okay. And no joke, like the majority of them smoke cigars. So it's like, okay. And they're not dying. Like, they're living to like 100 years old. So I'm like, okay, clearly cancer kills with cigarettes. But I don't think the stuff God creates is the same. So that's how I got onto this. And then, like, well, what is it about Cuban cigars that makes them so special? And it's the lithium content. And most people don't talk about it or know it, but that's what it is, exactly what you're saying. So now you're moving forward, you're finding
Mhm.
these solutions for your life. You know, the babies were healthy, you're healthy now. Where does your life go from there, Katrina?
Yeah, the whole process just spurred on my curiosity to really understand, kind of like you were talking about with
Yeah, with cigars.
cigars. So I went back to school to become a nutritionist, did quite a few years functional medicine training and then advanced cancer training directly with Dr. Nasha Winters, which was kind of cool to circle back around after I had read her book when I was cancering. But I did not intend to originally go to school to like become a practitioner. I wanted to understand what in the world had just happened to me because, I've always been fascinated with the body. I taught anatomy and stuff for many years, but this was a whole new level, a whole new realm that I was not familiar with. And so the more I knew, the more I kept my mouth open and it was telling everybody about what I was learning and people were demanding that I work with them. I'm like, oh no, I'm not. And it just kind of became a thing where I couldn't not do what I'm doing because I was so passionate about it and people were kind of demanding that I do it. So I absolutely love what I'm doing in terms of helping cancer clients now that want to figure out why they had cancer because that's the big question that no one talks about in oncology. Why is this here? And they say stuff like, well, it's just chance. I'm like, are you kidding? Because we have all this research and all this testing, and you're not using any of it. You're giving the same thing to everybody, and they're calling it precision medicine. And it's not at all.
Yeah, I remember talking to my not radiologist. What's it called? The people who do chemotherapy, the radiation therapy.
Mhm. The
I forget the name.
radiologists. Yeah,
What?
yeah. The radiologists do radiation therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another name too, but I remember talking to them and they're like, and I went to Mass General, Mass Eye and Ear, I mean, the best in the world at that time. And I'm like, wait, radiation causes cancer, but you're gonna fry me with radiation to get rid of the tumor. And I'm like 18 years old, 19 years old, and they're like, yeah, like, but we'll save you today and you might die later. And I'm like, okay. And no joke, I mean, that guy was amazing, but he died in like 50, late 50s, early 60s from being around all the radiation. So while it helped me, the thing that helped me wasn't the radiation. It was I cleaned my diet of all dairy, all sugar, all artificial stuff. And I don't live like that today, but for 2.5 years, I didn't even have ketchup. And I just had to do a giant reset on my body. And to this day, shrink, 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 shrink. The tumor just continues to shrink till I go home to see Jesus. So now you're figuring this out in your life. The cancer's in remission. You're getting this degree. And I'm sure the more you learn, the more you're like light bulb, light bulb, light bulb, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's exactly it because, it's a little crazy making, and it is very like process oriented oncology that, even the diagnostic techniques are all like cancer causing, cancer spreading, which drives me crazy. There's some new technology out there that I'm using that where you can diagnose without having to be invasive and toxic. But that's just, I mean, standard of care still doesn't acknowledge it even being there, even though it's past FDA stuff. So, when I'm looking at this, it's just, we know, for example, that like for me, I moved into a house that was super toxic mold laden. And that was one of the drivers for me is that I was very, very high in toxic levels of mold. If you go into an oncologist, are they looking to see, hey, is she moldy? Are those molds I mean, they're known carcinogens. But hey, let's just focus on the tumor. Let's make the tumor go away and then put her back in the same environment and see if it comes back. Let's cross our fingers. Like, this is insanity. We know these cause cancer. Why would we not look for this with all cancer clients and see, is this something that's an issue? Because, I firmly believe there's a time and a place, like you said, for standard of care. A lot of times things are very acute when you find them. You need to address it. Buy yourself some time. Awesome. But make sure that you go back and address the issues that caused the cancer in the first place, because that way you don't have to live in that dark cloud of like, is it going to come back? Because it will come back. And people are like, oh, it's just chance if it comes back. No, it's not. We can see very clearly with testing.
It's
You
like if
can
you eat
tell.
Twinkies all day and you get fat, it's not just coincidence. There's a reason, it's cause and effect.
But this is where it makes me crazy because people come to me and they have a strong, obviously, if they're going to bother coming to me in the first place, they have strong convictions that diet matters. And they'll tell me over and over and over again. I asked my doctor what I should do now, and he said, diet doesn't matter. Like, this is insanity. We know diet matters. We know that, and that's not even all the toxins that the people are living in or the different hormones and chemicals that are out of balance and deficient and such. Like, the idea is instead of focusing on the tumor is a symptom of a body that is screwed up. And so let's find all the ways that this body is screwed up that created this perfect storm. Because at the end of the day, our bodies were designed to cure cancer itself. As a practitioner, I don't cure cancer. And I say that often because that is not my job. That is not what I do. What I do is I help people to find the root cause drivers. We address those. And then the person's body, their own immune system that's designed to go after rogue cancer cells, eat away the shell of tumors and dissolve it, all that, it can do its job when it's not overwhelmed. So the magic question is, what are the root cause drivers for that person?
Yeah. And again, you've said two things that people really need to understand, that it's good for me to hear. It's good for everybody to hear. But you said, number one, there's so many variables. It's different for everybody. To say there's one magic, silver bullet to cure all cancer, it's not realistic. Right. And then two, people react differently. Like you mentioned mold specifically. Mold affects everybody, but some people, it's not a big deal. Some people, they get a whiff of it and they literally have a heart arrhythmia and they end up in the ER and they don't even realize what's going on. And it's just like a shellfish. I can't have shellfish or I might meet Jesus, right? Other people will enjoy it or some people will just get itchy. There's different levels of everything. So we need to know not just the overall plan, but God's specific plan for us and our parameters, right? So now you're dealing with people, Katrina, and you're helping them with the root cause drivers. You're helping them to put together a plan of wellness. First off, let's finish your story. Between when you got pregnant.
Can I go back to the mold thing for a second?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. This is your episode.
So with the mold, I think that's a really good example and a really good point because I hear people bring that up like, well, you're living in the same house as the kids, as the husband, as whatever. And I think the understanding of like, we all have a level of how much of a toxic burden we can handle. And everybody's different. Like for me, genetically, I suck at detoxification. I'm not good at it. And then you layer on the fact that I was having a lot of people making people for many, many years. They were pretty close together, so that takes a toll on my body. I'm not good at detox. You put me in that environment with mold and I get cancer. My kids who were in that environment did not. My husband, who was in that environment at the time, like did not, but he's got good genetic genes. And he was not making people for decades, so there's all these other factors that, again, when we start doing the testing, taking the history, I had a lot of other things that were not working properly on me that I didn't know. And this is where, yeah, you can have different situations and different reactions from different people because we all have different histories and different things going on that we may or may not be aware of.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's if you back up and wherever country you're from, like if you're listening in Turkey right now, if you're listening in Afghanistan, if you're listening from Italy, America, it doesn't matter. We all have cultural strengths. We all have cultural weaknesses, like just basically part of our ancestry, right? How God made us. But then there's also specific. If you're under a load all the time, all the time, all the time, your weakness, your resilience towards it will go down until you have time to recover. So what you're saying, Katrina, makes total sense. And we just need to know ourselves and how God built us. So now you're getting better, you're healing, you're growing, you're learning, and now you're starting to take on clients. So talk about between your birth and today, did we miss anything in your life before we transition to where you are today and where you're heading next?
I'm sure we missed a lot, but those are the what I think is pretty significant. Yeah, I mean, because I just kept refining my health, and to this day, I've got a little more wiggle room with my diet, built in, but I still stay pretty ketogenic-ish and very, very clean eating most of the time. Again, I got the wiggle room because this is not an acute issue that I can play with that, but making sure that I stay just vigilant on the toxins and making sure I'm not in a moldy environment and that I'm watching my blood work and making sure the different markers are in line and such, and the hormones. I'm perimenopausal. I'm 47 right now. So there's, shifting that's coming on the horizon. I want to keep those hormones really dialed in so that I don't have the crazy menopause symptoms that most people have, because that's not normal. Those are symptoms just like a tumor is. And then just listening to my body, it's such a nice thing to know that I have tools.
Yeah. And when you say markers, I instantly think like, well, what are you talking about? Take blood tests regularly. What are you talking about? I haven't gone to the doctor in 4 or 5 years because I'm self-paying in America. And it's like, I'm not going to pay for that government crap insurance. And I'm at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to, go spend $500 just for the doctor to say hi, right? Thank God I'm healthy, I'm strong, no problems. But if I was to take a blood test, 47-year-old
Yeah,
man, what should I be
I
looking
hear
for?
you. I am self-paid too, self-employed, always have been. And this is a whole nother topic. I feel like the insurance system does us a disservice because we don't pay for our healthcare, so we don't take it seriously. We don't value it. But I mean, at the bottom line, like we pay for what we see value in. And to me, like my clients, myself, like I see value in knowing what's going on behind the scenes. And again, if it was a practitioner that's not doing anything about it, most doctors, this may shock people, when they do a lot of blood work, it looks like a whole lot of markers. What they're running is a CBC, a complete blood count with differentials usually, and they're running a comprehensive metabolic panel. Those are together worth less than $10 in America. And they're giving you very, very little information. And the more obnoxious thing is that they're using the lab reference ranges. So your doctor looks at the panel. They usually don't spend any time ahead of time, just evaluating it. It's just you're in the office, there it is. They're just looking for what is out of range.
And the range,
Totally.
like you said, I don't know if you're going to go circle back to that,
I
but
will.
yeah, every
Yeah.
lab test has a different range. And if you
Yes,
don't
they do.
understand that, like not you, the listeners, so a 3.2 might be normal with one lab, but it's not normal with another. And if the doctor's not paying attention, they're reading your results totally wrong, correct?
Absolutely. And so the way that they set the lab ranges is by whoever takes the test, they set an average and they do 2 standard deviations. So this is a statistical thing. It has nothing to do with where somebody is healthy. So who takes the lab tests?
Sick people usually.
Sick people. Is this a good, accurate marker? No, because that means that we have these reference ranges that are way too big because it's based on sick people. And so one of the big defining factors of somebody that's a functional practitioner is that when they look at lab tests, they're looking at the functional ranges, or they should be. And those are much, much narrower and are going to actually be where any human feels their best. And this is based on research as well as clinical observations and such. But probably the biggest area that we see this being off is in the thyroid. You'll have people all day long, they come in, they get a TSH. So that's actually not a thyroid hormone. It's made by your pituitary sending a message to your thyroid of how much more thyroid hormone it should make. So they're not even testing the thyroid hormones. They're just testing your pituitary's hormone. And that's all they test 99% of the time. And the range is usually like 1 to 5, maybe 4. Okay, so the functional range, 1 to 2. If people are above 2, I am like, what's going on? And I will tell you that I run all of the thyroid hormones and the antibodies because I want to see where in the whole thyroid story of how these are made and circulated, where's the breakdown? What's going wrong? Now, standard of care has one option. If your TSH is high, they give you thyroid prescription medication, period. That's it. That's their only option. Well, if I understand what's going on in the thyroid story, where the breakdown's going, it could be your liver is not converting your thyroid hormone properly. It could be that you don't have the building blocks because your digestion's off. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that we can see when we run all of this and we understand what we're looking for. But again, this takes a lot more time from the practitioner, a lot more advanced understanding, and it's not prescription drug based. So there's a lot of reasons here why this isn't being done, but I just want to say there are so many people that are being told that there's nothing wrong with them when thyroid being off is it's a huge contributing factor to cancer as well as things like Alzheimer's. And us missing this has a huge impact on what's going on society-wise in terms of chronic disease.
Yeah, I was just talking to a physician, very high level physician, and we were discussing how America is like the only country that doesn't consider Alzheimer's and dementia a diabetes. And I was just like, I didn't know that. And like, yeah, like every other country in the world, that's diabetes. Not diabetes. It's a form of diabetes.
Type 3 diabetes. That's what they're giving it the name. And in America, it's like, oh, there's nothing you can do to prevent it. There's nothing, this is so preventable. It's hard to turn around. This is not something to take lightly. My dad right now has dementia and has had strokes and can't walk anymore, but this is all a blood sugar issue. Like I've seen his blood work. This could have been figured out ahead of time. Unfortunately, I didn't know what I know now back when we should have been doing this, and it's, too late for him, so to speak, but we can mitigate some of it. But this is absolutely preventable, and you can see it coming very easily.
Yeah, the sugar industry's trillions of dollars, and the diabetics, like the money they make off people with diabetes alone, ridiculous, right?
Yeah, so I want to clarify there. So when you say sugar, people, I think
unnatural sugar, yeah.
Well, people think you mean like white sugar, whether it's refined or unnatural, whatever. I'm talking any kind of carbohydrates, whether you're talking about flour, any of that stuff, even some of the carby vegetables like potatoes. Like this is what's driving all of the chronic disease going on when our blood sugar is off. And for me, that was a driver for my cancer. I was insulin resistant and didn't know it. Usually when people are talking about blood sugar issues, they talk about symptoms of hypoglycemia, and that has, shaky, hangry stuff. But when you have high blood sugar, which is going towards chronic disease, you feel really good. You have a lot of fuel running around. It feels energizing. It feels great. And people don't think there's an issue. They're like, no, I'm fine. They don't go get tested. And you can see this way before it's an issue. And this is leading to the heart disease, like you were talking about the heart disease earlier. That's what I'm like, okay, you got to look at the blood sugar. Cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, all the big chronic disease, it's all rooted in the blood sugar. And by that, I mean a displacement of carbs in the way people are metabolizing. And it's all carbs, not sugar.
What's your opinion of high blood pressure? That's something that, again, they're like, you go to the doctor, like, your blood pressure's high. I don't even know if the measurement they use for people is accurate. And they've changed it 5 times in the last 5 years. So that shows me it's probably not right. And then number two, they want to prescribe that medication like it's candy because it's a moneymaker. So what do you think from what you've seen about high blood pressure, the root causes and the cure?
Yeah, so for blood pressure, this is just like anything else. The question is, why is my body presenting this symptom? What is my body trying to tell me? If you're listening to the body, you're hearing these symptoms and you're taking them into consideration of what's going on. So the magic question is, why do I have high blood pressure? Not what do I need to take to make it go down, because making it go down artificially is not fixing the problem. And so you may look good on labs, you may, get your blood pressure down, but you didn't fix the problem. So what happened is you're just delaying when the problem is going to erupt into bigger things. And then people are like, oh, I didn't see this coming. Yeah, you did. You ignored it by putting, a pill on top of the blood pressure stuff to mask it. And this is what we do in America. It's symptom masking. And that is not going to ever get us to true health, but it's faster and it gets quicker results. And we in America, with the insurance industry, we want those doctors to turn people out quick. We don't want to pay for the doctor's time to really do a thorough analysis, and we want results yesterday. And this is where it's an issue. So in terms of blood pressure, again, you want to go back to why. Okay, so understanding the mechanisms of blood pressure, there's a lot of interesting factors. So usually you hear stuff like don't eat salt, right? Okay, the salt is not the problem. So one of the things, like you might have heard back in high school science, is that when you eat sugar, carbs, anything, your blood sugar goes up. So your body produces the hormone insulin, which puts it inside the cells. Okay. The thing is, insulin does a lot more than just put the extra blood sugar in the cells. It also signals the kidneys when the insulin is high, it signals the kidneys to retain sodium. So you see where this is starting to come in together. Yeah. There's this whole renin-angiotensin loop of, triggering the whole blood sugar, the blood pressure that is connected to the blood sugar. So again, looking at a real comprehensive blood panel, which is a lot more than that CBC and metabolic panel, to really dive into what's going on, what's the blood sugar like, and inevitably there's usually issues with carbohydrate load. So I would say look at the hemoglobin A1C, things like that instead.
Nice. All right. So with your story, Katrina, where are you today and where are you heading next? And how can we help you as a remarkable community help you get there?
Oh, thank you. So I am in remission, happily in remission. I feel very confident that I've got tools to see, to test things. I did have a mold recurrence, which again, I could see because I knew how to listen to my body and I knew what my issues were. And I'm addressing that. But again, it wasn't where 8 things got out of balance. It was one thing. If people are interested, I just launched a group program. And I always have my one-on-one clients, but the testing that I do is included in those programs. And you can find out more in the ebook that I'll give you a link to, the Roadmap to Prevent Cancer Recurrence, that goes over the labs that I've been talking about here, to see like what areas are you off in. And most of the time, the practitioners are not running this stuff and they're not looking at how it interacts with things like cancer, but other issues, like I mentioned, Alzheimer's and the big chronic diseases we want to look at. And these tests are really important for anyone. So I'm just trying to get the word out there. So any way that you can spread the message, if you are interested in working with me, my website is cancerfreedom.com. I'm on Instagram, just my name. It's Katrina Foe. And then I'm on Facebook, Nutritional Pilates, which is also the name of my first book. So, you can connect with me there. I'd love to hear or, work with you if that's an issue for you.
Beautiful. We'll put those links in the show notes. And Katrina, it's been amazing to spend time with you today. And again, I don't want to miss anything from your birth through today, where you're heading. Any final thoughts you want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, I'm super passionate about making sure people know that there's things that they need to do and look for that they can see when they're choosing, if they've got a cancer diagnosis and choosing what they want to do. I just encourage people to take some time, take a deep breath, pray, do your research, because you don't need to be rushed into things as quickly as they make it seem. And then with the alternative therapies, a lot of times when people decide not to do standard of care, there's so many choices out there that are amazing stories for some people, but then it doesn't work for other people. And this is where, if you know what your root cause drivers are, you can see which of those expensive and time-consuming therapies would be what actually moves the dial for you, because they're connected to the different root cause areas. And there's a lot of really cheap stuff that you can do strategically for you based on the testing that, again, can give you peace of mind and save time. Because what people don't usually know is that a lot of those therapies, so say like IV vitamin C, that can actually drive cancer if you're in the wrong metabolic state. But people aren't usually talking about that. They're not testing the G6PD to see where you're at. Things like matcha, fabulous, love matcha. I actually have my matcha here right now. But if you look genetically, most cancer clients, not myself, tend to have a slow COMT gene. And that means that they do not detox their hormones fast enough, which tends to lead to a buildup of hormones, which, a lot of people are familiar with. Estrogen dominance is associated with cancers. This can make it worse. The matcha can make it worse. So, knowing what your genetic predispositions are, and then that gives you tools on how to optimize it, as well as what supplements and therapies are going to be best specifically for you. And I think it's exciting that we have those kinds of tools and information, and there's more coming out every day, which is even more exciting. I just want that to get out there to people so that they understand they're not just passive, whatever's going to happen to me is just chance. It's not like that.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned like a metabolic panel that a normal everyday doctor would run is like $10, but you don't get charged $10. You get charged like $510. So when you're running these tests and helping get to the root cause with people, do you send them to labs locally, or how does that work? Because if you're in, Coeur d'Alene and somebody's in Boston or somebody's in, Nashville, Tennessee, how does that work to get the right test done to identify the root cause?
This gets so exciting because we have this ability. My clients are all over the US, which excites me. Unfortunately, I'd like to give them all hugs and I don't get that part, but I drop ship kits to them. So for things like stool, urine, saliva collection, you just do it in the privacy of your own home, mail it in, I get the results, etc. With the blood, that would be weird to do at home. So I'll send them, if they're in like a city with a LabCorp or something nearby, I'll send them a requisition and they can just go there and get it done. If they are out in the middle of nowhere, and again, I've been there, so I get it. I have a kit that they can then get sent so that they can go to a local like clinic or something to get the blood draw. So there's so many options, and it's amazing because we can see all of that stuff. A lot of it's tested home.
Nice. Very nice. Well, I appreciate you, Katrina. I really thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, reach out to Katrina, check out our website, continue the conversation. And remember, doctors are humans. They're not gods, even though a lot of them think they are. So don't just take what they say blindly. God loves you. He wants the best for you. Put the Holy Ghost inside you and you trust him as your savior. And you know more than any doctor in the world. So make sure you're listening to that voice inside of you that's going to lead you to the right way. Reach out to people like Katrina who are qualified and have proven themselves so you can get quality medical care and, move forward in your own life the way you need to. So, Katrina, thank you again for being here today. I really appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. This was a fun conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, we love you. Share this episode with your friends and family. Don't forget to check out our sponsors like MyPillow and Jasper. Use promo code Remarkable at MyPillow. Get up to 80% off everything you order every time. Jasper, you get the best air purifiers in the world that I've ever seen and used. $100 off with promo code Remarkable, and you won't regret it. Either one. Amazing stuff. And again, bottom line, wrap it all up. What Katrina said, like our slogan says, don't just listen to this great information she shared with you, but do it. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world, but most importantly, in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our friend Katrina Foe, and we'll see you in the next episode, ladies and gentlemen. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.